Okay, good morning, everyone, and welcome to the second of fourth Richardson Broker Development series. I'm Clint Madison with Cushman & Wakefield, and thank you for taking the time to participate in this unique setting. I know we're all been at home a lot and ready to get out and about and ready to see each other's faces, and I as well. And today will be a very unique setting, but nonetheless, it'll be very interesting, and we're excited about it. Before we begin with our speaker today, I'd like to thank our sponsors, our series sponsor of Michael Borg with Page. If Michael, love to have some remarks on your behalf. Michael, are you there? Okay, well, we'll move on to our brand sponsor, Durkin Properties. I understand they do not have anything to mention today, but we thank them for their support. And lastly, to recognize the other tri-chairs, Chris Wright with Jones Lang LaSalle and Chris Selbo with KDC. And we're excited to have those guys on as well. All right, our show today, I'd like to introduce our speaker, Dr. Yoram Solomon. Dr. Yoram Solomon served in the Israeli Defense Forces 35th Airborne Paratroopers Brigade.
Vince, can you stop sharing the presentation, please?
Yes, sir. Sorry about that. Okay.
Thank you.
Dr. Solomon served in the Israeli Defense Forces 40th Airborne Paratroopers Brigade, one of Israel's elite forces, where he learned firsthand the importance of effective leadership and teamwork and how to trust develops under fire. He's the author of the Book of Trust and 12 more books, 22 patents, more than 300 articles for Inc. magazine, and was named one of the top 20 innovation bloggers and one of the top 20 global thought leaders in the area of organizational culture. Yoram is the founder of the Innovation Culture Institute, a professional member of the National Speakers Association, and an adjunct professor in entrepreneurship and innovation at Southern Methodist University in Dallas and Hadassah College in Jerusalem. Last month, he became one of the first 5 to be certified as the virtual presenter by eSpeakers. Yoram managed global and virtual teams in small and Fortune 500 companies across all 24 time zones and conducted research on leadership and effectiveness and teamwork productivity in different environments and situations. It is my great pleasure to introduce a speaker who shares his birthday with Elvis Presley, David Bowie, Stephen Hawking, and Kim Jong-un. Please welcome Yoram Solomon.
Good morning. I want to take you back to October of 2008. In October 2008, you remember what the economy did. I think we're surpassing this now. But with all that the economy was doing, I was working at Texas Instruments, and Texas Instruments had just announced that they were going to lay off about 1,400 people, except they didn't tell us who. And so I don't know if my job is on the chopping block or not. The economy is tanking. Obviously, the investments are going south as well. But on top of all of that, I have to come up with a topic for my PhD dissertation. And if you don't know that, but you know what they call the person who barely passes the requirements for defending their dissertation? Doctor. And plus, the university tells you that a good dissertation is a done dissertation because only 25 to 31% of people who start working on their PhD dissertation will ever finish it. And so I'm aiming pretty low, but my mentor, Cordy, he's aiming high. And he asked me to come up with a topic that will change my life and the lives of others. And so I'm coming up with topics and he keeps knocking them down. And I'm coming up with another topic and he knocks it down, and another topic and another topic, and he keeps knocking them all down. And at some point he asked a pivotal question, a question I'll remember for the rest of my life. He asked me, what pisses you off? And I wanted to say, well, you, because I'm trying to come up with topics here and you won't let me. But the words that came out of my mouth were, why are people so much more creative when they work in startups than when they work in large, mature companies? There was quiet on the other side, and he said, I think we have a topic. So for the next 2 years, I researched that topic. I researched the answer to that specific question. I did that in the US, in Canada, China, Europe, Israel, and got chapters 1 through 3, submitted them to the committee, they approved it. Got chapter 4 done, submitted it to the committee, they approved it. The last chapter, chapter 5, the conclusions, I called Cordy on Sunday afternoon and I told him, I think I have it ready. I think I have it done. I'm done with chapter 5. He said, why don't you send it to me? I asked, give me 1 more week. Give me 1 more week to clean it up a little. I'll send it to you next Sunday. He said, fine. Unfortunately, Cordy went to sleep Monday and did not wake up Tuesday. So I did dedicated that research to him. I did graduate. This is actually my daughter, Shira. She was 9 at the time. She's 19 now. And this is my graduation. We came back from my graduation and Shira had a friend over for a play date. And her friend said, Shira, where did you go this summer? And Shira said, oh, we just came back from my daddy's doctoral graduation ceremony. And her friend asked, so is your daddy a doctor? And Shira thought about this for a second and said, yeah, but not the useful kind. Anyway, the other question that I got that was annoying to me was that people started asking, so what's the answer? Why are people so much more creative when they work in startups than when they work in large mature companies? And I was annoyed by that question because I spent 2 years, I published 348 pages and you're looking for a 1 sentence, a 1 paragraph. But what I realized is that I can actually answer this with 2 words, innovation culture. Actually, it's 1 word if you take the space out. Companies that don't have innovation culture, their employees are not creative. But then I started asking, so what is innovation culture? And I really built that model here that I published for the first time in a book in 2017, where the things in the top are the positive ones, the things in the bottom are the negative ones, the red ones. The ones on the left are vertical, the relationship between a boss, a supervisor, and an employee. The things on the right are the things between employees at the same level, so within the team. So a good boss gives autonomy, lets his employees or her employees take risks, try things, and even fail. A bad boss, and the employee, by the way, will take risk. A bad boss is someone who puts bureaucracy, and their employees, instead of trying to take risks, trying to do the right thing, what they would do is just CYA. On the right side, within the same team, the ability to hold what I call a constructive conflict or a constructive disagreement is what makes for good teamwork, for good innovation culture within the team. The flip side of it is office politics. And what I found as I started working with companies to try and help them build an innovation culture is that there is a piece missing in the bottom, in the center. And if that piece is there, you can hold the good green things and you can avoid the red one, and that is trust. Now, I have 3 disclaimers for you. First of all, this is going to feel like drinking from the fire hose. If it feels like drinking from the fire hose, all I can ask is please drink responsibly. The second thing is that what you're getting here today is just a taste. It's a taste of what I typically do with organizations in a full day workshop, but you're just getting a taste here today. We're only spending about 45 minutes. And the third one is I get distracted really easily. So it is your job as much as it is mine to keep me on track. You keep me on track, I'm done in 45 minutes and nobody gets hurt, okay? Let's do this. So I realized that trust is the foundation, but I also realized that high trust organizations are 64% more creative, 64% more innovative, and more effective and more productive. Employees in those companies have 74% less stress, 76% higher engagement. And if we are a for-profit organization, we deliver 286% higher shareholder returns to those companies. So a couple of years ago, I had a quiz on my website. It had 16 questions. And really all I asked is, what is the level of trust in your organization? Well, what I found was that if we only look at low and very low levels of trust in the organizations, we get 44%, 45% of people told me that they have low or very low levels of trust in their organization. Even if I throw in moderate, I'm at 76%. 76%, and moderate is not something that you want to write home about. 76% of my respondents, and I'm talking about more than 1,000 respondents, told me that the level of trust in their organization is moderate, low, or very low. Here is another finding that I made, which alarmed me a lot. 18.3% of people who participated in my surveys said that they don't have in their companies, and I'm not talking about a single person organization, I'm talking about companies with at least 2 people, 18.3% said that they don't have a single person in the organization that they can trust. 14% of people in companies with more than 100 employees said that they don't have a single person in their company that they can trust. Think about that. So, let me switch so you will see the entire screen. The next question is, what is the most important quality in other people? And I did another study, and in that study, I asked people, what is the most important quality for you in other people? And I was very specific. Those people are your boss, your employees, people on your team, colleagues, peers, a salesperson trying to sell you something, your government representative, or your spouse. Well, I got the answers. I got the top answers. I ranked them. And of the top answers, I then came up with a survey. I asked about the specific 6 types of people, specific 5 types of 5 qualities. And here's what I got. In 5th place of the top 5 was good looks. Yes, 0.83% of people who participated in that study said that the #1 quality for them in other people was good looks. Crazy. But 61.2% said that the #1 quality for them in other people is trustworthiness. And that's more than the next 4 qualities combined. Well, we didn't ask for what we're having right now. I really wish every time I look at this image, I really wish that somebody made stress balls that look like this. I know that I can use one. We didn't ask for this. All of a sudden, we were thrown into a world where this is what a city council meeting looks like. And yes, Olin, you do recognize this is the Plano City Council meeting. This is what a school board meeting used to look like when I was elected. This is what it looks like today. This is how I teach at SMU today. We all went into crisis mode. We all went virtual. And because we went virtual is what why I'm talking to you today. So first of all, we are in a crisis, and President John F. Kennedy realized at some point, and he made a note of the fact that the Chinese word for crisis is actually made of 2 parts. The orange one on the left represents danger, and the one on the right, the blue one, represents opportunity. What is the opportunity that we have today? Well, the opportunity is that during crisis, your true leadership skills become apparent. That's the opportunity. What is the danger? During crisis, your true leadership skills become apparent. So that is where the danger is. Now, what I'm going to tell you today is true, not just now, it's true when we're not going to be working virtually, but it is 10 times more important when we do. The research that I've done was not just research that was based on surveys. I interviewed a lot of people. Those are just a few of the people that I interviewed. I interviewed the Plano Police Department chief and the Plano Fire Department chief. I interviewed 2 U.S. Air Force pilots, one of which is actually Sam Johnson, who also wrote the foreword for the Book of Trust. I interviewed a former Navy SEAL, a small business owner, and one of Israel's leading divorce attorneys. And I asked them all about trust. I asked them all about their experiences around trust. As part of this, I actually developed a mathematical model for what trust is. which I'm not going to take you through today. I developed a more simplistic model that kind of explains the 6 components of trustworthiness, and I'm going to use some of them throughout the talk today, but that's not the focus of the talk. I'm not here to explain the model. I'm here to give you really 7, but I'm only going to bring up 4 during this talk. 4 habits that will improve your leadership effectiveness of a virtual team. Now, it's not just leadership, it's teamwork, and it's even working with your customers. Because if you follow these things, you will even improve your relationships with your customers. So I'm gonna start. Number 1 is increase time and intimacy. One thing that's special about my model of how trust gets built is that I believe that trust is 1, relative, and 2, dynamic. See, the level of trust that we have in people changes dramatically during interactions. Every time we interact, the level of trust can go up or down during that interaction. But between interaction, when we don't see people, as a defense mechanism, the level of trust that we have in them slowly declines. So the amount of time that you spend with people now is really, really critical to avoid that decline. One of the stories that I like to tell is when I interviewed that Navy SEAL, he told me about an incident in Afghanistan. And they were looking for a few insurgents, and as they were going there, he was part of SEAL Team 1. 4 of them were going up there, and all of a sudden they start hearing AK-47 fire shooting at them. 3 of them start shooting towards the fire. One of them, the one that I interviewed, turned his head and he starts shooting the other direction. He follows the other direction. He's holding the machine gun and he's facing backwards. And I asked him, how do you do that? And he said, because I had their backs. And I said, but wait, people are firing at you towards your back. Are you not afraid? And he said, I trust them. I said, how do you trust them? And he said, I have their back, they have mine. The worst thing that can happen to me is that one of them will die. And, you know, that's a level of trust that only if you served in the military or specifically in special forces like a SEAL team, you would understand. And as I tried to investigate and understand why, what I realized is that there was not a single person in that team that he only sees occasionally, every now and then. He sees those people. He has seen those people every day for the last 7 years. He has gone through some very intense activities with this team, and that builds trust. So spend time. But time is not enough. Intimacy is important as well. One day I was about 13 and my uncle and aunt, they gave me this little present. And the present was a little tile that I could put on my wall. And the words on that tile were, nobody ever died of laziness. And I'm thinking, what? Why are you telling me this? Am I lazy? I mean, I was in school, in high school, I was working, I was doing stuff, I was inventing stuff, I was so busy, and you're telling me that I'm lazy? It took me a year to bring myself to actually ask them what they meant. You know what they meant? When I asked them, they said, oh, no. What we mean is that you're doing so much that you can lay back a little, you know, to try and be lazy just a little, because nobody ever died of laziness. But this is what happens if your communications are limited only to words. Now, on top of words, there is the pilot's voice. So I'm a pilot, some of you know that, and I took friends once flying with me in a plane, and one of them all of a sudden said, hey, why don't you use the pilot's voice? I'm like, I don't know what you're talking about. What pilot's voice? I don't have a pilot's voice. Oh, yeah, you do. I heard that before. Use the pilot's voice. Do the pilot's voice. I'm dumbfounded. I have no idea what he's talking about. But anyway, we kept on, we taxied, we got close to the runway, and I told them, you know, I'm going to talk to the tower now, And when I talk to the controller at the tower, I'm going to ask you to all be quiet because, you know, we have the intercom is actually connected to the radio, to the transmitter, and they're going to hear everything. So be quiet because I'm about to talk to the tower. Okay? They said, fine. I said, okay. So be quiet. I'm talking to the tower.
Reed Hillview Tower, Cherokee 3016 Tango is ready to go at 3-1 right.
That's when I realized I have the pilot's voice. I'm using the pilot's voice. What was I trying to do? I know. I was trying to tell the tower. I was telling the tower, hey, you know, forget the words that I'm giving you here. I mean, the words really, all they say is that I'm ready to take off at runway 31 right. I wanted you to know that I am in control here. I wanted you to know that I know what I'm doing. I wanted you to know that I have the power. And I conveyed that through my tone of voice. I could not have conveyed that if I would text him that message. I want to do something a little interactive with you. I have opened the chat box and I'm looking at the chat box and I'm going to show you a little video, okay? I'm going to turn myself into being small again and I'm going to show you that video. Now, this is a 1-minute video. There is no sound, so don't worry about not hearing anything. In that video, I want you to write down emotions. In the chat box, write the emotions that you can discern from that video. Let's do this. I'm looking at the chat box. Tell me, what emotions do you see? Well, what is the circle feeling right now? Frustration? What is the big triangle doing? Power. Yes, Bob. What do you think the circle is feeling right now? Fear. Yes. How about now? What do you think is going to happen? Trapped. We're feeling trapped. The circle is feeling trapped. What is the circle feeling now? Fear, aggression. Aggression probably. What's happening now? What do you think the triangle, the big triangle, is feeling now? Angry. Yes. Yes, that's frustration. What is it doing now? Okay, let's take a look at quick look at what you wrote here. I see frustration, I see fear, trap, power, frustration, helplessness, love, aggression, insecurity. And so, okay, I need to clarify probably what we're seeing. What you saw here is a group of geometric shapes. They have no feelings. They cannot demonstrate feelings. Yet you attributed feelings to them. You know why? I didn't make this up. This came out the first time, 1906, that statement this is done as part of a commercial. One look is worth 1,000 words. Ladies and gentlemen, your facial expressions, your body language says more than your tone of voice. That says more than the words that you actually use. Now, there is a book by Albert Mehrabian that came out in 1971. This is the book where this rule of 7, 38, 55% came out, where he said that 7% of our liking and our feelings are conveyed through the words that we use, 38% through our tone of voice, and 55% through our body language. And you know, this is one of the most misinterpreted rule, because people think that this is how communication is being conveyed. It's really not communication. But the other thing is, even his experiments back in 1967, 68, I would challenge them. But here's something, a quote that I brought from his book that I really like. This is actually in the foreword to his book, where he said, when our words contradict the silent messages contained within them, others mistrust what we say. So let me build on this a little. So if I build on this, here's what I see. The impact on trust. Let's say that our communication is limited to text only. It has minimal impact on trust, for better or worse. Positive emotion text. You know how you can put a good word there that appears to be sincere? You have some positive impact on trust. Now, you can put a negative emotion in a text message or an email, like capitalize, 3 question marks, 3 exclamation marks. There are things that you can put there to show negative emotion. You will hurt trust a little bit. Face-to-face meeting. You know, and right now that we have to wear masks, I would even say that having a Zoom meeting or a video call is better because they can see your entire face as opposed to real face-to-face in person, but when you have a mask and I can't really tell what's in your face. Now, here's the worst thing that you can do. The worst thing that you can do to trust is to have inconsistent nonverbal communications with your words that you use. So you can tell someone, and tell me that you haven't done this before, ever. You can tell someone, hey, what you did is, that was a good job. What did I say? What did I just tell you? Did I tell you that I really think that you did a good job? That does more to reduce trust than saying you did a good job and mean it would do to increase trust. But there's one last thing that I want to share here, and that is when you don't communicate with your tone of voice and with your body language, or at least your facial expression, you let the other person make assumptions on what you mean. And you know, Peter Drucker said the most important thing in communication is to hear what isn't being said, and this is what people do. So try and make sure that what you write, what you say, and how you say it are consistent. Maya Angelou said that when people show you who they are, believe them the first time. Look at how I emphasize the word show, because this is really the most important part of it. By the way, if you remember 1972, there was a survey that put, you know who this is? Let's see if somebody is going to catch the name. Who is this person? I know some of you will remember actually seeing what he's doing right now. This, correct? This is Walter Cronkite. Thank you, Jim. This is Walter Cronkite. The moment that we're seeing right now is when he tells the American people that President John F. Kennedy had just passed after he was assassinated. And, you know, the reason that he was named the most trusted person or the most trusted man in America, and I can argue about the validity of that specific survey and how it was done, but the reason he was said to have been that is because look at his face. It is consistent with the message that he was conveying. This is why it's so important. Of course, today it would look more something like this. This is where you would see Walter Cronkite. By the way, another interesting thing, when you do a Zoom call, I want you to notice that when I'm doing this kind of more, you know, when you see me, something that you see is you see my hands. You see my hands. And hands are very important. In fact, when two people meet for the first time, and this goes back into the first humans ever, the first thing that you would look for is their hands. And so when you do a Zoom call, if there's any possibility that you're going to zoom out a little so that people will actually see your hands, you actually increase the consistency of what you say with how you say it. Because remember, the trust is emotional. It is based on feelings, and feelings are conveyed less through the words and more through nonverbal communications, your tone of voice and your body language. And this is how we wrap up number one. And number one is increased time in intimacy. And if you're looking at your watch right now, you're going, man, if he just did number one, how long is it going to take before he's done with number four? Don't worry, the others are a lot faster. Number two, if you must track what your employees are doing, I'm hearing of all kinds of software that would allow us to track what employees are doing so that we know that they're by their computers really working for us. So I'm going back to my study. And if you remember in my study, I looked at the number of people or percentage who said that trustworthiness is the most important quality for them in other people, including their boss, their employees, their peers, a salesperson trying to sell them something, government representative, and their spouses. I broke it down by the different people, the different types. You can see the 61%, but if you pay close attention, you will see something else. Something else will stick out. And that is that for one of the 6 types of people, trustworthiness was not number 1. For leaders, when I ask leaders, what is the most important quality for you in your employees? Number 1, with 48.5%, was the willingness to work hard. Number 2, with 39.5%, was trustworthiness. Which reminds me of something that Henry Ford once said. He said, why is it that every time I ask for a pair of hands, they come with a brain attached? Ladies and gentlemen, this is 2020 and leaders are still thinking that way. Okay, let me move on. By the way, a little thing that you may want to know, I'm not sure if you're doing that or not, but if you hover your mouse over my image, and there are 2 buttons. One of them says mute, the other one has 3 bullets. And if you touch on that 3 bullets, one of the things you can do is pin video. The other alternative is just go to speaker view in the top. If you do that, my image takes the entire screen. Just saying, you probably knew that. Okay, here's a question. How many of you have kids? Okay. Those who did not raise their hands, how many of you know what kids look like? Okay, much better. So, I have 2 daughters. One of them is 21, one of them is 19, but they used to be 1 year old. Each one of them actually went through that period, which is the time when they lift themselves from the floor. And when they lift themselves from the floor and they stand up, the next thing that they realize is that they don't just stand, they can actually walk. And after they realize, oh, I can walk, the next thing that they do is they try to run. And the first thing that happens to them when they run for the first time is that they fall. Yes. And the first thing that they do once they fall is no, they don't. You said cry. I saw that. No, they don't. No, they don't get up and keep going. The first thing that they do is they look at you. And in every family, there are 2 roles. One of them, not necessarily the wife, is the one that goes, and when they do that, your kid will realize that something terrible had happened and would start crying. The other one, not necessarily the man, is the one that goes, get up, keep going. And when they do that, your kid looks at you and goes, well, but something happened here. There's something red here in my knee, but it needs dripping, but I guess it's not a big deal because they don't seem to make a big deal out of it, and they would get up and keep going. Trust works that way as well. Trust works that way because if you trust someone, they will behave in a trustworthy way. If you show them that you trust them, they will behave in a trustworthy way. If you show them that you don't trust them, they won't. Leadership works the same way, leadership and followership. If you give your employees autonomy, they will be accountable. If you give them the bureaucracy, you will get CYA. One of the best definitions of autonomy is something that comes from Professor Teresa Amabile in Harvard. Even though it was in the context of creativity, eventually she realized too that it applies to effectiveness, to productivity, and other things than creativity. And she says that creativity happens when, and specifically when she defines autonomy, autonomy is not when you let your people do whatever, when you let them choose which mountain to climb. You choose which mountain they climb. Autonomy is when you let them to decide how to climb that mountain. And I want to show you that when I asked employees about their leaders, number 1 was trustworthiness. The most important quality for an employee in their leader was trustworthiness. But the second most powerful one was their boss's willingness to take risk. What risk? Risk on them. What your employees are telling you, what your team members are telling you is, I want you to be willing to take risk on me. Let me try things and let me fail. How do you know if you can trust someone? Hemingway, The best way to find out if you can trust somebody is to trust them. So number 2 is you give autonomy. So remember when I started number 2, I said, if you have to track what your employees are doing, don't. Just don't. Don't track what your employees are doing. You're not improving their creativity, effectiveness, productivity, anything. You're not improving anything. All you're doing is they're going to do exactly what you tell them. And believe me, that's not what you want them to do. So number 2 is give them autonomy. Number 3, sensitivity is going up. During this crisis, during this pandemic, during all the social unrest that we're seeing right now, sensitivity is going up. So use more empathy. What do I mean by empathy? First of all, some of you may remember what the Maslow's hierarchy of needs is. And, you know, it starts with physiological needs. I mean, the first thing that you need is you need air, you need water, you need to be alive to even care about anything above that. Then you need safety. You know, I don't want anybody to be able to break through my door and kill me. I want to feel loved. I want to belong. I want to have self-esteem. And finally, I want self-actualization. So for me, self-actualization is going to be sitting in the front seat of an FA-18C Hornet, probably lot number 20. That would be self-actualization. For every person, it's something else. Right now, during this crisis, people care less about their self-actualization because they're starting to worry about things that are closer to the foundation of that hierarchy of needs. So what is empathy? Okay, I'll give you a few seconds. This is a picture where you go, aww. So you can do that. Babies and cats have something in common. They both believe that the world revolves around them. Cats never get out of that mode. Okay, and typically when I do that, I would look at the number of participants to see how many we drop. This is how I know how many cat people we have. But babies grow out of that. And the way they grow out of that is because we tell them about the golden rule. We tell them that do unto others what you would like done to yourself. Well, I love sushi. How many of you love sushi? Raise your hand. Very good. My wife doesn't like sushi. My wife hates sushi. And so would it make sense for me to take her to a sushi restaurant on her birthday because that's what I'd like done on mine? The golden rule, right? When our kids grow up even further, we tell them to put yourself in somebody else's shoes. Well, here's the problem with doing that, because when you put yourself in somebody else's shoes, those shoes are a different size, they're a different style, they're not yours. You are not that other person. True empathy is your ability to see things from another person's perspective as if you were them. And this is what you do. So for example, you know, somebody wants to schedule a meeting with me, and I can't begin to tell you how often this happens. They want to schedule a meeting with me, and what they do is they put something that's called Meeting with Yoram on my calendar. I'm Yoram. I have no idea who that person is. I have no idea who I'm meeting. This is because they're not seeing things from my perspective. They're only seeing things from theirs. By the way, how do you build empathy? You start by listen. Did you realize that the word listen and the word silent use exactly the same letters? Do you think that's accidental? Actually, it is. But in order to listen, you have to start by being silent and really pay attention to the other person. And you may remember that Stephen Covey said that most people do not listen with an intent to understand, they listen with an intent to reply. Empathy is something else. Empathy is once you try to understand someone. There is a reporter, and she typically reports in CNBC. I see her quite a bit in NBC. You know, never thought much of what she's doing, what she's talking about. To me, she was a reporter. She was kind of an object, you know, an object that reports things, until one day I saw this video of her reporting. And somebody, her husband actually, took that picture from beyond. And look at what she looks like in the screen. In the screen, she's a reporter. She's that object that just delivers content. Look at what was actually happening 1 inch outside of the camera frame. That moment when I saw that video, she stopped being that object that reports things. She started being a mom. She started being a person. Empathy is really trying to understand the person that you're communicating with. I actually had that video, but that's fine. You don't need that. Now, another thing, during this time of crisis, you may want to rethink your humor, sarcasm, and direct feedback in their relationship to trust. I wrote about that in my book, and I'm not going to get too deep into that, but the level of humor that you can convey to another person, the level of sarcasm, the level of feedback you can give them really depends on the level of trust they have in you. And you do not want to use more humor, more sarcasm, and more feedback than that line, because then it becomes, you know how it becomes danger. You know how it is that I can tell you something and you're going to be fine with it, and another person can say it to you and you're going to be offended. Probably the other way around. Somebody else that is closer to you, somebody that you trust, will tell you something, and then I come in, I say exactly the same thing, but you get offended. Why? Because you don't have that level of trust with me. Well, something else has happened. Times have changed. We are more sensitive, which means that that line, you know, when this thing started, I think back in March, I used to say, hey, we now have the first case of Corona in our house, which was obviously a joke, because what I meant is Corona beer. And then I would say, we now switch to Shiner Bock. You know what? That joke used to be in the green area before we got shut down in place. And now that line had actually just declined. So I want you to think about the fact that what is funny from one person may not be funny from another. What's funny from you by one person may not be considered funny by another, but also that what used to be funny before somebody in China decided that eating bats makes sense, it's not funny anymore. And you have to keep that in mind. So number 3, sensitivity is going up, so use more empathy. Number 4, make information available, communicate what's necessary. So, you know, if you don't provide enough information, you reduce trust. On the other hand, if you provide too much information, you can be overwhelming. Both of those are unproductive. Both of those hurt trust. So I can't tell you how many organizations, and I know that you can tell me stories about organizations like this, where the way communication works is everybody communicates to the boss. The boss decides who gets to hear all the different pieces of information. What I'm going to ask you is to change into a different mode. As the boss, as a leader, you are part of the team. Information needs to be gathered in one specific location, and every person, including you, needs to deliver information to that one place where it's accessible, where it's available to everyone. Let everyone communicate with whomever they want to communicate. If you are the boss, you have one more responsibility, and that is you need to give them the big picture. And to explain what the big picture is, again, I'm going to take you to, I'm a pilot. Whenever I taxi in, I think this is the Zurich airport, it is in Switzerland. Maybe it's not Zurich, but I remember when you taxi in an airport, you look at the map, but you don't really know where you are because you look around you and things don't look very familiar. When you take off and when you're at about 3,000 feet and you make a left turn and you look down at the airport, that's when you see this image. At that moment, you understand where you were. You understand what every piece of the airport is there for. Where do you keep information? There are plenty of technologies, plenty of places where you can keep information and make it available to everyone. One other comment, and that is in communications, never ever use BCC. You know that feeling when somebody, a peer of yours, emails you something, you're the only person on the two, there's nobody on CC, obviously you can't see if there's anybody on the BCC, and all of a sudden your boss or anybody else responds to that email, and you go, wait, did you put someone on BCC? Did you communicate something to me, sharing it with another person intentionally such that I will not know about that? What does that do to trust? Be careful with that use. So number 4, make information available, communicate what's necessary. I want to summarize I told you that there are really 7. We only talked about the first one. First one is increase time and intimacy. Number 2 is give autonomy. Number 3, sensitivity is going up, use more empathy. Number 4, make information available, communicate what's necessary, and be careful with how you communicate. Below the line, I'm going to show you soon that I have handouts ready for you, and the slides of this presentation are available. I'll show you where you can find them. Here are 3 more that are available in the handout. Focus on shared values, and the handouts will tell you what kind. Hold constructive disagreements, and think about the future after that. It's so easy for us to forget that there's going to be a future after that. With that, what I'm going to do now is open it up to a few questions. So whether it's Clint, Shannon, or John, if any of you are following questions or the chat box, let me know if there are any questions.
Okay, Yoram, I do see that we have an attendee who has raised his hand, Jordan.
Okay, Jordan, what's your question?
I'll allow him to talk.
That would be a good idea.
Hey there, can you guys hear me?
We hear you.
Great. I actually typed my question into the Q&A, but I wanted to get your thoughts or your take on rebuilding trust once it's been broken or breached.
Oh, that's a tough question. And I'll tell you why. When I do my workshops, one of the things that I talk about is the fact that, and I prove this actually through research that I've done and research that other people have done, that anything negative that you do in a relationship is pretty much 3 times more powerful than anything positive that you do. So getting to the point where trust was lost means that there have been quite a few negative things that have happened. And even if the ratio was 1-to-1, for every 1 negative thing that happened, there was 1 positive thing, still negative has 3 times more impact on reducing trust. It is very hard. What I typically do is this. I have this process, it's a 7-step process, and that's really what I do in my workshops. In that process, we do one of 2 things. Either work on every person individually, so kind of multiple people sitting here. I did that with an audience of 500 people, did that with an audience of 150 people, where we actually go, and you're going, I'm just guiding you through it. What is that one thing that you need to change? How do you change it? How do you build a plan for it? How do you track your plan? How do you make sure that you're accountable for that plan? And this is how I'm going to call it, dig every person from being untrustworthy into being more trustworthy. This is what I would do when I work typically when a large group of people who are either not connected, different companies, or even in the same company, but not necessarily working together. When you have a very specific team, here's the problem. The trust in that team may have been lost even due to 1 person. So one of the things that I would typically like to know is who is that person? Because just like a chain is as strong as its weakest link, you want to identify this one. Here's how it works. In order to have trust, in order to have productivity, innovation, creativity, all those great things, you must be able to be vulnerable. You must be willing to be vulnerable with me. Ask stupid questions, suggest stupid ideas, do stupid things. But you must trust me that I'm not going to use that against you. Well, you must trust him. You must trust me. But what about him? Do you trust him? And the thing is, you have 1, I'm going to call it untrustworthy person in the team. Nobody is going to be vulnerable. Nobody. It kills teams. So when you're talking about a very specific team, I would go with, let's analyze the relationships. I have my own assessments to do that and so on. Let's identify what is going on. Who is the person? Why are they not trustworthy? Typically, what would happen is that person is just new with the team. Sometimes what happens is that person is doing something that's really hurting trust. And as a result, either we can work on that thing. That person may not know because nobody's giving them feedback because they don't trust him or her. Or maybe they just can't. And if they can't, then there are hard decisions to be made. So, you know, one of my mottos is no BS. Let's not deal with BS and political correctness and all. Let's identify what the real issue is. Let's attack it head on. My starting point is, I need you to know, you Jordan, I need you to know what you're doing wrong, and let's work on how you improve that, rather than assuming that you can fix it. I don't know if that answered your question. Any other questions?
Yes, Yoram, there's a question in the chat from Jim. It says, what's happening with trust between races, police, and citizens of all political persuasions? What about people who deliberately work to diminish trust, either with a business or within our large society? It's a big question.
Yeah, no, I'm glad this is not a loaded question, Jim. Thank you for that. Actually, I would tell you, you should listen to me tomorrow, because tomorrow I'm talking about communications and how do you communicate? How do you have constructive dialogue without starting by shaming? Because that's one of the biggest things that's happening right now. But I don't want to go into too much details. There are a lot of things that can be done, but they really start with awareness. I mean, if you don't know what you're doing to reduce, I mean, I even analyzed, why is there lower trust in the police department or in city management or county or state or our national management? Why is that? And it starts with that identification. By the way, I'm big on, let's identify just one thing. Let's start with one thing. Okay, I'm not sure that I answer that. It's a much deeper question to answer than I can do in a few minutes. Let me just suggest this, since I did not see any other question. I have about a 2-minute closing story. So does anybody have one last question before we move on to? I don't see a yes, then I'm going to assume a no. So first of all, I want you to all know that if you go to this link, yoramsolomon.com/RCC, there is this is actually a snapshot of that screen. There's actually a lot of content that you can get. It's free. The first screen that you're gonna hit, I think, is going to say, actually, I think you're gonna go straight to it. If it asks you to give your details, or you don't have to, just go ahead and click that. If it asks you to book Yoram as a trust speaker for your next event, you really should, but this is not what I wanted to tell you. One of the most important things, the most important handouts that you have there, is a handout that has 5 pledges. And that's the feedback pledge, the leadership pledge, the accountability pledge, the effective meeting pledge, and the effective communication pledge. And I would strongly recommend that, print those out, maybe modify them, use them in your own company, use them for yourselves. Those are great pledges to make, and they're very simple to follow. But I want to finish with the story. I told you that I'll finish with the story. When Clint introduced me, he said that I served in the Israeli Defense Forces 35th Airborne. This is actually a picture of mine when I served there, which, by the picture, you can see that was taken about 2 weeks ago. But I served in the Israeli Defense Forces, and I want to take you with me on a mission that's pretty similar to all the other missions that I went through. So in that mission, it was 2:30 a.m. It's the middle of the night. Let me make this big screen. It's the middle of the night, and you can see 7 of us here. We're about to enter a building where intelligence told us that there are terrorists in that building. So we have a demolition expert, and he's the one putting the explosives next to the door hinges. And the thing is, what you don't see is that up there on the right side, top right side, it's above this screen, is an open window. And if somebody hears us and pokes their head through that window and looks at us, he's going to see us, and he's going to start firing from his AK-47 or drop grenades, which is even worse. Well, in this case, we're dead. One thing I didn't tell you, and that is that 317 yards away in that direction, behind an M110 rifle, sniper rifle, Behind the 10x scope is our team sniper. Our team sniper has that window in his crosshair. He is breathing shallow. His finger has already pulled the first stage of that trigger. He is 0.8 pounds away from sending a 7.62 millimeter, 168 grain bullet through whatever shows up in that window. One thing I didn't mention is that that person behind the rifle was me. That team that you saw there trusted me, not with $10, not with $100, not with $1,000. They literally and voluntarily trusted me with their lives. Trust is very powerful. And if there are three things that I want you to take out of today's session, is how important it is to build trust, to be trusted, and to know who to trust. Thank you.
Well, Yoram, that was fascinating. Thank you so much. I know everybody got a lot